we're going to stay with the Federalists because there is a man in Myron's book who is a 21st century character. Gosh, we'd make him anything today, and he'd probably be masters of Wall Street and everything else. His name is Alexander Hamilton. His birth and survival and education are Dickens plus, I'd have to say, television. That he arrives in New York at all is a miracle, but he quickly is recognized as a prodigy. He goes through Columbia College, then called King's College, quickly. The important detail, however, is that he pleases one man more than anyone else, George Washington. How, Myron?
First of all, so this illegitimate West Indian immigrant comes here and impresses by his military prowess. He had real student activism. He quit Columbia College to join the Army and became a very fine artillery captain and caught Washington's eye. Here's Washington, the childless father of his country, who sees this brilliant young man. And the thing about Washington is he was like a great CEO. He had a vision for what he wanted to accomplish, and he had the self-confidence to pick out brilliant young people to carry out the details of it. So he knew that he needed a rich country, something like a British fiscal military state in order to be powerful. And he understood that Alexander Hamilton had a plan that would make it come about. It's interesting, how Alexander Hamilton, in a way, is the positive counterpart of his bitterest enemy in a certain way, James Madison. James Madison says in Federalist 10, look, we're all different. We all have different talents, different skills, different levels of ambition. So if you have freedom, which is the most important thing you can have, and if you set up a government to protect life, liberty, and property, which is what government is for, it means that there's going to be inequality of property. And you know that phrase, the tyranny of the majority, we all learned in school? He said, what would that be? Well, the form it would take is that the unpropertied many would steal the property of the rich few by unjust taxation, by an inflation of the currency, which silently transfers wealth from creditors to debtors, or other, as he says, improper and wicked means. Hamilton comes along and says, okay, yes, we do all have these different talents and skills and ambitions. And the thing is that if you have a narrow economy where you can just be a farmer or a shopkeeper, people with special talents are just going to molder away and have them unused. So if you have a broadly diversified economy with lots and lots of opportunity, everybody can find that thing in him, that spark, that will, yes, make him rich, but will also realize him and make him everything that he has in him to become. So for Hamilton, economics was a kind of soul craft. And it's a beautiful American vision, and let's hope we can hang on to it.
The relationship between Washington and Hamilton is successful during the war and afterwards, but it breaks down when Hamilton becomes the Secretary of the Treasury in those early years. This is Washington's first term. Their sparks fly between them because Hamilton is ambitious to grow, and it looks like Washington wants him always as his son to do what he's told. But ambition is everything to Hamilton. He's ambitious for himself. He's ambitious for the country. And I'm imagining him, Myron, as you present him, sitting there at the cabinet meetings, and across from him is Jefferson.
Oh, they grew to hate each other, and it was not personal. It was philosophical. They disagreed about everything. Jefferson believed that being a farmer was the only moral kind of life to lead, incidentally forgetting that he was not a farmer. He was a slave driver,
right.
And his farming was done for others. It was done by others. He believed that if you had a finance system, you would just create these corrupt squadrons of paper dealers, a bunch of Wall Streeters, who would be at once the tools and the masters of the government.
I mentioned what Myron is saying Jefferson condemned is what we call the bond market. And it's the United States of America has prospered through war and depression because of Hamilton's genius.
That's exactly right. And they disagreed about human nature. Alone among the founders, Jefferson believed that human nature was perfectible, and all those bad impulses that we have could somehow be enlightened out of us. Hamilton and all the rest of them believed in what they called the depravity of human nature. And, I've written this down, so I won't forget it, John. Why has government been instituted at all, Hamilton asks? Because the passions of men will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint. And, unquote. And by the way, they never will. So one of the things that the founders were so great at is making a government for ordinary men as they really are, and not for prodigies of virtue. They weren't going to retailer human nature like the French Revolution. They weren't going to create new Soviet man. They were going to take ordinary Americans and make a government out of them. Now, these ordinary Americans were pretty special already because so many of them being Protestant immigrants from the persecution by the Anglican Church of dissenting Protestants, of Congregationalists, Presbyterians, and so on, or persecuted in Europe because they were Protestants, so they were the French Huguenots and so on. So they came here already in search of religious and civil liberty, and they came here with a tradition of electing and running electing their own ministers and running their own congregations. So they had a political culture of self-government. And by the way, they read the Bible themselves and didn't feel the need of any worldly authority to tell them how to interpret it. So they had a personal culture of self-reliance and independence, and that was just a wonderful cultural material.
The founders at home, Myron Magnet, The Building of America, 1735 to 1817. And when we come back, Mr. Hamilton versus Jefferson and his best friend Madison. And we go south again, but we see the split that turns from the 18th century and the founders to the 19th century and the slavocracy. I'm John Batchelor. This is the